Hi everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Velvet Lounge Life. Yes, it's an Outlander edition. This is episode 11 of season 5. And guess what, you guys? There's only one more episode left. So this season, even though it was slated for 13 episodes, I confirmed that from an insider. For whatever reason, there will only be 12 episodes, so there's only one more after this. And some other spoiler alerts that I have for you are, in this episode, check out the furlonged look on John Gray's face, because according to the actor that plays that role, he's done. This will be the last time that we see him in the Outlander series. I find that hard to believe, but it came straight from his mouth. Okay, from his fingertips, typing on Twitter. So obviously there's also gossip. This is a gossipy thing, that he will have a spin-off of his own, which I have mentioned this much earlier on in my Outlander adventure. So I wonder if that's coming more and more to fruition. Also, I will throw some more things in here. Kilts will return, not for the reasons that we all wish. Ian is going to have to paint his face in protest. He is not a happy camper, and he is ready for war. Diana wrote this particular episode we're going to go over today. So episode 11, Journeycake, was written by Diana, the writer of the Outlander books. Also, Ian is going to be back for season 6. So he will not die this season as was originally thought. And baby Jemmy, is going to get hot hands. And What Dreams May Come True is the title of the final episode. So lots to go over in this particular episode, Journeycake. And I want to get right into it, but not before asking you guys to do me a super quick, easy favor, which is to subscribe to the channel and click, before I could pronounce the CL in click, you could click the thumbs up, which would be much appreciated. Also, down below in the comments, let me know what you think about John Gray and him having a, I know that Diana wrote books, the John Gray series. What do you think about there being a show, a drama dedicated to that character? And also, how does this mix in with Jamie meeting William again later on in the future? Not in the future, but, it's still in the 1700s. And William finding out that Jamie is his dad. Like, how does all of this tie in? It's going to be really interesting. So without further ado, here we go. So where we open in this episode, Jamie, Claire, Bree, and Roger are on their way back to the Ridge. And as they're on their way back, and this is obviously after the whole Stephen Bonnet finality thing, they come upon this cabin which has been burnt pretty much to the ground, and all of the inhabitants have also been incinerated. Now, this is, once again, it's another episode that is completely different in many ways than the book. Of course, there's a few similarities. And this is one of those situations where they kind of quickly go through this part of the story. And what ends up happening is Roger actually stumbles upon this one individual that's barely clinging to an iota of life. And she's burnt beyond recognition, burnt pretty much down into the ground, but for some reason still has breath a little bit. And he actually will help her over into the dark side, the afterlife, Valhalla, whatever you call it. And that's something that's sort of a telling message, because Roger to help euthanize anyone is so far beyond the Roger that we know, because when Jamie offers to do the deed, Roger is like, no, I will do it. And what they end up doing is burying the individuals that they find in one large grave. They do leave a cross on it, and going back to the ridge. So this is a picture of that poor soul and Roger's assistance. So one of the things I'm doing, which is completely different than the other episodes that I've gone over, is I am actually watching this for honestly the fourth time, and I will be stopping the action, taking quick snapshots like this so that you can see this as it happens across the screen in episode 11. So forgive the triangle in the middle. So life at the ridge goes on as normal. One of the reasons I wanted to show you this picture is the peanuts. So you have here the hulls in one bin, and then in the other container you have the actual peanuts. And here are the peanuts that are still to be dealt with. So what happens is the word journey cake is because Claire is going to create peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for the lot, meaning Bree, Roger, baby Jemmy, Ian, of course Jamie, and herself as a final celebratory dessert before a particular action occurs. We will go over that action later on in this episode. So that's the tie-in with the peanuts, peanut butter and jelly. There's going to be some references to that as well. And right now, back at the ridge, everyone's like going about their chores, including baby Jemmy is playing with his Uncle Ian. So baby Jemmy touches, these are actually opals that Ian has. They're just playing, you know, Uncle and his little nephew. And he's like, ow, that hurts. Yes, baby Jemmy can form complete sentences better than some fake homesteading farmers that we know. I just had to add that in for a particular reason. I will tell you why later, maybe. And so that tells us that baby Jemmy has the gift of travel. So, wow. Remember when Roger and Bree stated that if they found out that baby Jemmy could travel, which is weird. And the reason it's weird is they have precious and semi-precious gemstones that they could have, you know, put in his hands earlier to see if the child could travel or not. But simply by happen chance, this occurrence happens, and now we know that baby Jemmy can travel. Also, we're going to learn that Ian is going to ask a lot of questions because he already has 85% of the answers. So now everyone is concerned. You can see Claire and Jamie, of course, Bree comes into the picture. Roger is like over here more to the right. And they're all like, what's happening? And the baby says, it's hot. I don't want it anymore. And so Ian is like, you know, what's wrong with you? You were playing with it a minute ago and you seem to be fine. And what's going to happen is Bree, Roger, and Claire are all going to touch the stones and find out that they are very hot. So they know that these are semi-precious or precious stones that they can use for traveling. What will also happen is, of course, Jamie's going to touch the stones and be like they're icy cold, which is the same reaction that Ian has had as well. So, the visitors of the ridge that we don't like, which usually are people like this. So this wine is one of the Mr. Browns. He also has a brother who is a wife beater. And this guy, as well as his brother and this fellow, who is one of their followers, and maybe he's like a captain, if you will, they want Jamie to get all of the men of the ridge together so that they could ride along with them to go and raid and murder and just cause chaos in Indian villages, because without any investigation or proof, they are stating that the American Indian folks are the ones that are going around burning down all of these cabins, which is not true. Basically, it's like a land grab. These people did this type of thing all the time, blamed other people, especially other races, so that they could, basically, end up having more power. So Jamie does not want to join another false fight or a fight that he does not believe in. So he tells him, I will have to think about it. Now, they don't like that answer because when Jamie had to come to them, when Governor Tyron the Tyrant wanted them to go and fight, the regulators, these guys had to be convinced, but they did come along to support that campaign. So this guy is like, why can't you just do that for us? Like we did this for you in the past. So come on, you have to love the handsome Ian. So Ian tells these guys, because they're saying, yeah, the Indians have taken scalps. And Ian's like, no, probably not. And Indians are not the only ones that take scalps. As a matter of fact, they probably didn't even start the practice. And so, they're looking at Ian kind of like, okay, who are you? What are you? And where did you come from? Obviously, they know he's a person of the Ridge. And he must have some relation to Jamie. One of the other things is Jamie does not really want to go with these guys. He doesn't care really what's going on at this moment because he just got back from another hellish campaign of everything that happened with Stephen Bonnet. Previous to that, the crap with the Tyrant, of course, with Murtaugh dying, and the list just goes on and on and on. The guy, he basically says, I just want to tend to my whiskey stills, my land, the people of the Ridge. We're just trying to get things shorn up here, deal with our crops, our animals, etc. So now that the Brown clan has left Fraser's Ridge, or so they think, Ian finds the moment to talk to Claire and Jamie, and he asks them right out. He's like, I want to talk about what happened with the Stones, with baby Jemmy. And of course, Claire and Jamie are looking at each other like, okay. And he's like, what does it mean? He's like, who are you really? And then they really look at each other, and Claire reveals to him that I'm from the future, 200 years from now. And as if you watch the episode, you'll notice that Ian is not surprised. And the reason why is he has Ottertooth, who is a time traveler as well. And I actually created a video on who can time travel. I will link it to this video somewhere up here in the cards, I believe they're called, somewhere up here. And he has read Ottertooth's diary, so he has a really excellent idea of what is going on. And he says something like, I knew something was weird about Aunt Claire from the very, very beginning. The way she talks, the way she does things, the medicines, her knowledge, etc. And also Roger and Bree, they just appeared out of nowhere one day. Like that didn't just happen, or did it just happen? So he has all of these questions. He knows there's something special about certain stones, which are mentioned. And just to let you know, the diary was given to him by the medicine woman, who was murdered by a crowd like the Browns. And once again, for a lie. And so he's already read most of it, except there are a few parts that are in Latin, and he is not as versed in Latin to be able to decipher everything that is said. So Jamie will translate for him. So Ian says, I knew you were a fairy, Auntie. And he has this smile, and you can hear it in his voice. So he's not afraid of the situation. He has such an understanding of it. It's pretty awesome because you get some of that old Ian back, that adventurer, that believer that things in the world can be better and possible if you open your mind and allow it. So those that refuse to believe in history are damned to repeat it, even in the year 2020 on a particular farming channel. So this fellow Ulysses, if you recall, he worked for Jocasta. And one of the things that you learn is that he has been a freed person for decades. After Jocasta's husband, Mr. Cameron, was killed, she went back to River Run and she signed papers freeing some of the people who were at River Run, including Ulysses. However, Ulysses, because of his love for Jocasta, stayed on to still work for her, assist her, etc., over all of these decades. And right now, where you find him is in this cabin-like structure, which is actually where Murtaugh lived. And he's there because, obviously, after having to defend her and save her life by killing the horrible Mr. Furious Forbes, he, because of the color of his skin, cannot remain at that plantation because, obviously, there were too many witnesses that knew that Forbes was going there, that saw Forbes there, that saw him get out of the carriage, etc. So the best plan they could come up with is for Jamie and Claire, for them to help him along. So what's going to happen, and I'm skipping far ahead, is John Gray is going to agree to the plan that Jamie will create to take Ulysses with him back to England, where he will pose until they get back to England as someone who works for John Gray. That way he gets out of the quote-unquote ununited United States, and he, first of all, will be completely safe, and secondly, he can either, I don't know if he'll go by his same name, change his name, but he'll have options at life. So here's a document that shows that Ulysses has been a freed person for decades. And not only is this signed by Jocasta, it's also signed by the infuriating Mr. Forbes, which I thought was ironic, since he is the one that needed to meet his maker sooner versus later. So Bree and Roger are putting the final touches on their plan. And yes, people, they are leaving Fraser's Ridge. They are not only leaving the Ridge, they're going back to the future. And in this episode, you will actually see them go back to the future, we think. Do they actually make it to the future? Are they actually in the same time, ahead of that time, backwards from that time, or in their own original time? We don't know. But we do know that when they awake after traveling through the stones with baby Jemmy, they are going to look flabbergasted, shocked, and almost disgusted and surprised in a way, so that you have no clue what's going to happen. However, in episode 12, the final episode, we will find out where they end up landing. So part of the plan that Roger and Bree come up with is they need to make sure they have a coherent, easy to remember, as close to the truth story to tell everyone. They don't want to just vanish and disappear. Why? Because obviously that might cause a lot of problems for her mom, dad, and anyone associated with them. Also, they care about all of these people. So they don't want to, they care about, of course, her mom and dad, but they also care about Lizzie, Marcelly, Fergus, Ian, the list goes on and on. Lizzie, they want to make sure that they understand that, they're going to Boston, and this is because Roger is going to be seeking the position of being a professor at one of the universities or schools there. So that's the story that they're going to tell. And the goodbyes are tearjerkers. So if you're someone that can end up in a puddle on the floor in a fluffy, soggy, yucky, wet, nasty mess of Kleenex, this is the episode for you because of the number of goodbyes. And they are very well written, amazingly acted, and very effective. So there's a visitor at the Ridge, John Gray, which I already talked about how he's going to help Ulysses. So the reason that John Gray is at the Ridge, and he doesn't know at this point about like this plan that Jamie has and about what's going on with Ulysses, Jocasta, etc. But he will know, and he of course agrees without any hesitation. But the reason he's at the Ridge is to let Jamie know that he's leaving Virginia, but he will return at some point in the future. He tells him he loved, because he has land there. So he tells him he loved, working the land, getting his hands dirty, etc. But he has to go back to England. That's why this plan works. And he gives Jamie a gift. The gift is going to be surprising, and I will show it to you in just a moment. So John Gray tells Jamie the reason that he has to return to England, it's all official business, etc., and that he feels a storm coming. And Jamie, of course, knows that that will be the American Revolutionary War, so he tells him, basically, he concurs. And John Gray also reveals that William will inherit Asmere and become the Earl of Asmere. And this is when he gives him a gift. So the gift is a portrait or a miniature, as we call them in the antique business, of William. So this is what William looks like now. And John Gray says that he looks more and more like Jamie by the minute. One of the other things that will happen in this episode is Jamie will talk to Bree, make it known to her for the first time ever that she has a brother, and he will actually tell her the entire story of Asmere and when he was an indentured servant and how William came to be, etc. So in the middle of the night, Claire awakens super hot. If you notice, Jamie is still fully clothed. He fell asleep. She let him be. Before, she was preparing her toilette, which means it's a way that a woman prepares herself, and a man also would have a toilet as well. Before they go into slumber, I and my husband go through this routine ourselves. Nowadays, most people would consider it just taking a shower, but part of a toilet is lotioning. Maybe you add a little bit of perfumed oil, you comb out your hair, etc. And she's done all of this, and Jamie knows that when she puts on her special perfumed oil, that she's ready for love. That's one of their signals. So there's no time like when one must have a midnight treat on an open window sill. So that is what occurs. And after all of this, there's some scientific things that Claire discusses with Jamie the next morning about looking in this microscope, seeing his little manly bits swimming around in a little bit of solution. And he's like, how did you get those? And she's basically like, hello, they could live for up to 24, 23 hours or whatever it was. And I don't know what the significance of that is. I remember reading about that in the book as well. But yes, so there you go. And this is a look on Jamie's face when he realizes that the sperm on the slide belongs to him. And he is, let's say, quite proud of that. So one of the things that this does prove is that Jamie can still have children. That's something I picked up from that. So as aforementioned, Jamie seeks out Bree. And this is when they have the conversation about her brother. he purposely sought her out so that he could tell her about him before she obviously leaves for her trip into the future. Something to note is that when it was discovered that baby Jemmy could travel, Bree and Roger made it clear as part of their plans, and they made, they verbalized this to her mom and dad, that they would be leaving within the month. So within a month, at this point, I believe there's maybe just days left before they are to depart. And so they're tidying up, finishing up, putting an exclamation point, period, smiley faces at the end of each of their, relationships, if you will, because they don't know if they're ever coming back. Like when they leave, the intention technically, and what especially Jamie, Ian, and Claire are preparing for, is that they will never see them again, ever. So that's what occurs. If you want to know what love is, when Marcelly tells Bree, "You are like my sister," wow. Tear-jerking moment. And you can see Fergus there, because what an amazing fellow in all respects. Just like Ian, what an amazingly awesome fellow. Like, such good characters in this show. And so every goodbye is like this, because Bree knows, or at least she feels, as if she will never see these folks again. So Ian makes it clear that he wants to travel with Bree and Roger. He wants to leave because he knows that they are going back to the future with baby Jemmy. He also knows that the only person that knows about them being able to time travel, which means Bree, Roger, Jamie, Claire, and now baby Jemmy, is not only Ian. He knows, but also he now knows now that Murtaugh also knew, but no one else has this knowledge. So he wants to go back to the future, not necessarily to where Bree and Roger come from, but back. He wants to go backwards, basically, in time, to fix something that occurred with his wife. That was his Indian wife. And we still don't know from the television show what that issue, problem, etc. was. Is she alive? Is she dead? Is it something to do with her children, etc.? So Claire tells Ian the whole process is very complicated, and it has something to do with inheriting the ability to travel. Like, it's not something you can just do. And Ian is like, but you're a healer. Can't you fix this? Can't you make it work? And she makes it very clear that it's not something that she has anything to do with. It's just something that is. And he also asked her, since you know what's going to happen in the future, history, can't you do something so that this revolutionary war does not occur? And she tells him when they were at the War of Culloden that they did everything they could to prevent that event from happening, but the only thing they could do is save some souls, and those were mostly the people of the area of Lollybrook and some of the surrounding areas there, so that not every Scottish individual was massacred. Unfortunately, a lot of the men were killed, but they were able to only save a few, and that means that they can't stop large events from taking place. And he understands that, even though he wishes it was otherwise. So there are two more visitors, but one is a patient. This lady is the wife of this evil Mr. Brown, number 2, not the first Mr. Brown that you saw. And he is a wife abuser, beater, whatever. And unfortunately, her mentality is so downtrodden and stumbled and tromped upon that she's like, well, I deserved it, if I had just slept with him. However, what she learned is from that doctor. Remember, Claire was like, she created that flyer with Bree to teach women how not to have babies, or at least to hold off on it, so they didn't have 32 children they couldn't take care of, and also have to do all of the work and be enslaved to these men. And one of the things that this guy is going to see in Claire's desk, simply by happen chance, is that Mr. Rawlings, I think was his name, Dr. Rawlings, is going to have his name is on this plate engraved on one of the books that, of course, belong to Claire. And without asking, why do you have this? Who is this? Whatever. He just figures out there's something going on with women not wanting to have sex with their husbands and have all of these kids. And he is going to end up creating this situation where Claire is kidnapped. Poor Marcelly here is going to be knocked out, and little boy Saint Germain is going to find her and tell Fergus that mommy's laying on the floor and she's not moving. It's going to be a chaotic mess. And all of that part of the story plot is going to go into the next episode as well. So here's another one of many goodbyes, John Gray and Bree. And, you know, John Gray, of course, doesn't know about future travel, anything like that. But Bree is almost pretty clear that, you know, it's possible she will never see him again. And of course, he's very forlorn about the fact that this is going to probably occur, and he's going back to England, and he sort of feels that there's an impending war, so who knows where any of them will end up in the future. So, final goodbye with Mom. And it is heartbreaking. And you have to remember that when Claire came back to the past, and ended up in Jamie's print shop. Remember how she ate that peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Bree was the one who made it for her before she traveled. So here we go. So Ian was selected to be their traveling companion.